These days, lots of watches are doing everything they can to get your attention, and your money. That can be a good thing and results in lots of interesting designs, dials, and complications. But what happens when you want something simple and straightforward? Welcome to Addicted to Watches. Today, we have yet another watch from Seiko's JDM range that has since been discontinued. It's got some design detail when you look beneath the surface, but at the same time, manages to be straightforward and no nonsense. This is the watch that kicked off the SARX line, the Seiko SARX001. It's something I'll admit I don't think about often. I hear a model number from Seiko, like the SARX033 or SAGZ083, and just accept it for what it is. But I don't always wonder what all those other numbers may be, or what number 1 might be. Today, I get to satisfy my and hopefully your curiosity with this SARX001. It obviously sold well enough in Japan during its time for Seiko to justify continuing the SARX references. But if you come across one for sale today, is it still worth picking up? I'll save my verdict for the end, but before we get there, let's take a look at the watch. From a distance, it can look pretty simple, and in a way it is. But there is a surprising amount of depth and detail going on here. There are a few distinct levels of height. Starting from the bottom, we have a hobnail textured circular ring that sits behind the indices. It's quite a small texture and scale, and adds interest without being too distracting. Sitting above that is the center section of the dial. This section somehow manages to be both frosted and slightly sunburst at the same time. It stretches just to the inner edge of where the indices sit, and provides the canvas for Seiko to apply a paper-thin logo above the pinion, as well as print automatic 23 jewels down below. While it is technically a Presage watch, it comes from a time before Seiko started advertising that on the dial. I think it's much cleaner this way. If all that wasn't enough, it also has a slight pie pan effect. A pie pan dial is one that has a distinct slope around the edge, and, you guessed it, resembles the shape of a pie pan. Level with this, and crossing the chasm of the hobnail section is the minute track. We've got partial seconds marked, and each 5 minutes gets a larger rectangle printed in black. Now, we've come to what is probably the most adventurous part of the design of the dial, and that's saying something about the rest of the dial, if Roman numerals at 12 and 6 are adventurous. All markers are kind of applied, but also kind of just float over the center section of the dial. The 12 and 6 differ slightly from all the others in that they are filled or painted with grey inside the polished frames. All of the other indices are tapering buttons and have fairly large polished bevels that catch the light, while the top section is made up of vertical striations that look more or less brushed to the naked eye. At 3, we've got a cutout and applied frame surrounding a white date, which I guess you could call colour matched to the dial, but that wasn't particularly difficult in this instance. The hands are pretty simple, all polished, Dauphine shaped, and well proportioned. The hour hand finishes just shy of the indices, and the minute hand just shy of the minute track. For the seconds we've got a simple needle hand. Being polished, they can occasionally get lost in certain lighting conditions, but overall, they're pretty legible. Another aspect of the watch which really helps with that legibility is the crystal. Seiko have applied a decent amount of anti-reflective coating to the underside of this domed sapphire crystal. Domed crystals can often pick up a lot of reflections, but this one manages to cut them down pretty well. From an extreme angle, we also get a lot of distortion, so it's just a single dome. The doming is fairly gentle and sits flush with the case. Speaking of the case, let's take a look. If you've watched some of my previous videos, the case will look pretty familiar. It seems like Seiko reused this case design for later models like the Urushi SARX029, as well as the enamel SARW011. We've got a case diameter of 40.5mm. It's a size that will suit a lot of wrists comfortably, though it is just a touch larger than I would have preferred. Height is managed pretty well at 13mm, which has been extended slightly thanks to the crystal. The curved shape of the case, which we'll look at shortly, keeps the lug-to-lug very compact at just 47mm. This, combined with some sharp downturn of the lugs, helps the watch to wear very well. The space between those lugs is thankfully a standard 20mm. The case itself is made up of a slim and quite steeply angled bezel that has been high polished to catch the light and other reflections. It does also have an ever so small flat section as it meets the crystal. The lugs are very curved and narrow, which results in a very elegant look. Those too are high polished, as are the sides of the case. Looking from the side here, we can see just how much those lugs point downwards as they leave the case. On this side at 3 is the crown, and compared to a lot of other Seiko watches from the same period of time, you might notice that the S used to sign the crown is a little different. Where many others have a more curved S with something almost like a little snake head, this one is much closer to the font used in the Seiko logo. I'm not sure why they don't use this S all the time, to be honest. The crown does not screw down, so it can easily be turned to wind the movement. Based on the SARX model name and the period of time this watch comes from, you can probably guess that the movement beating away inside is the Seiko SARX001 movement. It hacks, hand winds, beats at 3 Hz and has a power reserve of about 40 hours. It's a step up from the regular 4R movements you often see in Seiko watches. It can be seen through the display caseback on this watch, though there isn't anything particularly impressive going on with finishing and decoration besides some striping on the rotor. The caseback does screw down, which gives it a surprisingly competent 100 meters of water resistance. Seiko bracelets cop a bit of flack, but I think they're generally fine, and this one is no different. It's 20mm at the solid end links as it leaves the case. Those end links are male end links, but since they point down so sharply, it doesn't really impact the effective lug-to-lug when on wrist. The links are proper 5-piece links, and have these 2 polished thin pieces running the length of the bracelet. It tapers to 18mm by the time it gets to the clasp. The clasp is pretty much the same as what we got on the SARX033. Pressed shell with a milled scissor, and 2 positions for micro adjustment. It also has the same gap when closed, that many people complained about in relation to the SARX. I can't say I'm too bothered by it personally though. Now, let's get it on wrist and see how it wears. On my 7-inch wrist, I think it wears pretty well. The dial is quite big, so it does have presence, but the compact lug-to-lug and curved shape manage it well. There is a lot of polishing on those hands and indices, which do a good job catching the light as I turn my wrist. Even though the height is a little high at 13mm, it doesn't feel that tall. As a watch that's on the dressier side of casual, it's still a good size to be worn on an everyday basis. Those polished accents on the bracelet also pop nicely as I turn my wrist. Overall, it's a very comfortable wearing experience. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Well, at least when it comes down to personal taste. There are plenty of watches out there that mix up basins and numbers for indices on the dial. Think Rolex Explorer or Seiko Alpinist. But a lot of the watches that, in my opinion, pull it off successfully, do it with Arabic numerals rather than Roman numerals. It's no secret on this channel that I'm not a big fan of Roman numerals in most cases, so I could be biased. But I did say it comes down to personal taste. Also, for a watch that's pitching itself as an everyday watch, I still would have liked to see some lume. Seiko clearly had enough space on the 12 and 6 for those grey filled sections, so they could have stuck some lume in there instead. I can't think of many loomed Roman numerals I've come across before, but it would be interesting at the very least. Finally, if I'm making changes all around, I'd probably shave 1mm or 2 off the case size, but that's just because I prefer slightly smaller than slightly larger. So, now we come back to the question I posed earlier. If you come across one, is it worth picking up? Well, if you're looking for a straightforward watch that's slightly on the dressier side, with a crisp white dial that has some subtle details, if you're willing to investigate more closely, then you could do worse than this. It's a watch that comes from Seiko's golden age of JDM releases, so there are no questions about the quality and value on offer for the price range. It just comes down to whether you dig the watch. If it didn't have the Roman numerals, I think it would be much more widely appealing. But there are plenty of people out there who like them. So, if that's you, and you meet the criteria I just described, and happen to come across one of these watches in the wild, not a niche demographic at all, then buy with confidence. If not, it's a decent watch with no major flaws, and, like I said, you could do worse. What do you think about this watch? Are you a fan of the Roman numerals? Am I too hung up about them? Do you have another favourite from the SARX lineup? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.